Hello and welcome to this session, Connect, Combine and Publish Easily with Data Virtualization, where we will show you a demo of Denodo 6.0. Before we get started, let me present a small sample scenario. Imagine that you need to create a nice semantic data model for your business users, customer, invoices, products, etc. However, the reality of your data center is different. That data you want for your model is spread across multiple diverse data sources, databases with different SQL dialects, applications in the cloud, Hadoop or NoSQL databases, etc. Therefore, in order to deal with all these different pieces of information, you have to deal with different protocols, different technologies, different schemas, so things are not that easy. What we're going to show you today is how to use virtualization as the middle layer to create that single repository that in real time it will offer that data model to the business users without the need to replicate that data. So with that said, let me actually share my screen and show you how the solution works so you can see the product in action. There we go. This tool that you see here, this is our administration tool. This is the studio that the Denodo developers will use in order to create, connect, combine, and manage the system. You see that it looks pretty much like any tool to manage a relational database. You have different tables, you have a shell, you can write SQL, etc. That is because the Denodo, in short, is a virtual relational database. So I want to show you how that actually works with an example. You see this view here that I'm going to open client with invoices. It looks like any table in a relational database. It has different columns and different data types for them. I can execute, and in this case I'm going to run just like a select star and get some data back here. So you see it behaves just if this were a relational table. In reality though, let me show you what this actually is. If I show you the tree view, you can see how this object, client with invoices, is actually defined as the combination of different objects, client, address, and invoices that come from different locations. In the case of client and address, those are tables coming from a relational database. Invoicing is a web service. So I'm putting this content together so in real time, the Denodo can access those different entities and return the result set to the consuming application. So how to do that? How to create this kind of objects? Well, it's kind of like a three-step process that pretty much correspond with the three layers that you see here in this diagram. At the very bottom, you have the connection to the data sources. The Denodo has different connection wizards that let you connect the Denodo to a variety of different technologies. In this case, databases and web services, but many others, as we will see in a little bit. On top of that, we have this layer here, client, address, and invoicing. This is what we call base views. Base views are really important because it's the part that provides you with the abstraction between the downstream technology and data virtualization. In short, base views are representations in the Denodo of the metadata in the catalog of the original system. So this client here represents the table client in the CRM database. This invoicing here represents the response of the web service that will give me the invoices. The benefit of these base views, and the reason why they are so important, is that they will contain all the logic required to get the data from the source using the corresponding SQL dialect or using the corresponding, like in this case of the web service, HTTP call. But from here on, they will look just like a relational table. That enables the third and most important step. I will be able to combine and transform data from these objects regardless of the original location. In this case, you can see here that I'm doing joins and selections to define my object client with invoices. So let me show you kind of step by step how to create an object like this. Let me close here and get started with the data sources. I have a bunch of examples here that I use for demos, but let me use like one connection from scratch. I just have to click on New, Data Source, and pick the connection wizard that I will need for my particular system. In the case of databases, it's usually JDBC or ODBC, but I have others, like, for example, multidimensional for cubes, like SAP Business Warehouse, Microsoft Analysis Services, things like that. Web services in any fashion, delimited files, Excel, still fairly common. I can even, using our web scraping technology, get data from a website. I have a custom SDK for others. So we can pretty much connect to all kind of data sources. In our scenario, we're going to connect a relational database, have the data here in a MySQL. So if I double click on the object that you see here, you can see the details of that. So in the case of a relational database, the most important part is this first item here, the database adapter. You can see if I open this drop-down, the different vendors that we support. This will tell Denodo what are the characteristics of that particular database. What is the SQL dialect? Because between Teradata and Oracle, the difference in SQL is going to be significant. So we need to know what the system is in order to create the corresponding SQL statements in the right format. Then you fill login, password, etc., and you get access to the catalog. So from here, from the catalog, you see the different objects that you have available, store procedures, views, etc. And you can select the ones that you want to incorporate into your virtual layer. You can go ahead and click on everything, or you can select individual objects. Click on Create Selected, and Denodo will read the metadata from that catalog, will map the data types. This is important. If I leave my mouse hovering, you see that this, for example, was a varchar 30. Denodo map that into text. This is important because as you start getting data together from multiple places, the difference, little nuances between data types will also be abstracted by these base views. Other than that, you just click on Save, and the view will be part of your virtual schema that way. The other piece of my example will be the web service. So let me scroll down here to get data from that web service. It's pretty common now to have applications in the cloud. Some of them we have specific connectors, for example, for Salesforce.com. But for many others, you can just use our web service connectors, like this one here, and configure them to get the data that you need. In this case, it's using HTTP. So we can click on Configure and get all the parameters here. In this case, you see there is a parameter, client ID, is this part that you see that goes behind the @ symbol. That will be an input parameter, and that's pretty common in the web services. Sometimes it goes here, can go in the headers, can be in the post body of like a request. You also have configuration for authentication using OAuth and things like that. In this case, it's a fairly simple web service. We just need to specify the URL with the input parameter, and that's it. Just to show you an example, this is the view that results for that web service. And I can open the execution panel, and I can now send SQL. Also notice here that I have my client ID, that is an input parameter. As a filter in the where clause, that's part of that mapping between technologies that the base view provides. And when I click execute, I get my data back. Now, the data is coming from a web service, but that's completely abstracted from the perspective of the end user. If I show you the execution trace, though, you can see here at the very bottom that that call was actually transformed into an HTTP request to that particular web service with the input parameter sent here, in this case, to the URL. So you can see here in action that abstraction between different technologies happening thanks to that base view that I just created. Now that gets me to the third step. Third step is creating now combinations between these different objects. Let me close here first and move to that third part. So actually I can use the shell, you have here an example, and start writing code in SQL to create all those views or just define joins across my different entities. However, many users prefer to use the graphical wizards that we provide for that. For example, if I click on New, you see here Join, Union, Selection, etc. In this case, I'm going to use a Join wizard to define my view. This is a drag and drop wizard, so I can drag my different views, in this case, client and address, as well as the web service I was mentioning before. So I have my 3 views here in the canvas. Now I can drag the arrows for the join conditions. based on client ID. I can review that. I can maybe change this into a left outer join if needed. I can add filters. This is, in short, if you're familiar with SQL, just a graphical wizard for SQL. I'm going to get only the customers from San Francisco. I can do group bys. I can also, here in the output, shape the structure of that view that I am creating. I'm going to call this sample for my demo. I'm going to call this only ID, for example, etc. I can also remove fields that I don't need, that is client invoice and this one here, so I don't need those client IDs. And I can also create new fields or modify the fields that I have. Let me just show you a quick example. I'm going to call this test, and this gives you access, this new field wizard gives you access to all the transformation functions that we have, and also to all the fields. So you can see here the scroll is pretty big. All the built-in transformation functions that we actually provide out of the box. We also have an SDK, so if you have like your own logic that you need to use to create some transformations, you can create that, register that as a custom function, a custom transformation, and use that. In this case, I'm going to do a very simple concat between, let's say, name coming from client, actually let me add like a comma, and some field coming from the web service, the description, for example. And I just click OK, and that's it. You can see here now my field test that I just defined. I save the view, and there we go. Now I have my view here. Actually, let me rename that with sample demo. There we go. I have my view, and I can just execute SQL and get data back here, like if this were a table in a relational database. There we go. I had to send the SQL. I don't have to worry about the technologies underneath, the corresponding dialects, etc. All that is figured out automatically by the execution engine, and that makes like life much easier from the perspective of a business user, if you think about it. If I show you the execution trace, you can see all the details of the execution just here to give you a summary on the left side. You get the query that has been sent to the underlying database, as address and client are in the same place. Another push down the join for that. Also the filter by city. We keep the data lineage of every column, so we understand that city comes from that table. And on the right side, you have all the calls to the web service that is providing me with the details of the invoices for that particular customer. So that happening automatically behind the scenes. Let's see now, kind of like the last step. Now that I have the objects that I need, how do I access those objects? I would like to show you here a summary of the different options. First one, obviously, I've been working in Denodo, kind of using SQL all the time. So you also have the ability to query these objects in SQL from the outside. For that, we have different drivers, JDBC, ODBC, and ADO.NET. So you can integrate different reporting tools, ETL tools, service buses, custom applications, just treating Denodo like a relational database, sending standard SQL commands. I'll show you a little example. We also have web services, so you can publish any object, any view that you have in Denodo as a web service, whether it's SOAP, REST, or Microsoft OData. And we also have a web-based information self-service tool that will allow business users to see the catalog as well as also query that data. And lastly, we also have JMS listeners, so you can also look at Denodo as a provider of information for a service bus, for example, using JMS. So let me show you how that actually works, starting with a reporting tool. I have Tableau here open. Tableau is a pretty popular reporting tool. So I'm going to get that connection to Denodo using ODBC in this case. I just get my connection going. Now I can search for some table. I'm going to search for customer. There we go. I just drag my table here, and I can just use this table here as if it were coming from a relational database. Just going to get kind of like a very simple report. So you see that this is sending SQL to Denodo, getting that data back, treating Denodo as a relational database, and displaying here, in this case, a map of the United States based on the results of that SQL. So pretty simple. A reporting tool will just treat Denodo as a relational backend, as any other database. Let's move now to the other option, web services. How do I create a web service out of my model here? I just need to select the objects that I want to publish as web services, right-click, New Data Service, and I can select SOAP or REST. In this case, I'm going to show you REST, and that's pretty much it. I just give a name for this. I'm going to call this sample web service. Those are the objects that I'm exposing through this web service, also the associations based on the primary foreign keys between them. And in settings here, you can see the output kind of available are in HTML, XML, JSON, and even RSS. I can configure things like security and some stuff for like cross-domain utilization. I'm just going to go with this. Click on Save, and that's it. My web service has been created. Now it's available here in my Embed Apache Tomcat that we provide, and I can just deploy it. And that's it. Now my web service is ready to use here. I can click on my different objects and get that data back. And if I add here, actually, $format XML, I get that same data in XML or that data in JSON. So this is ready to use, for example, from a mobile device, an iPad, a website that will use AJAX calls to get that data in JSON. Straight out of the box, using the same model and the same security. So what else? The third option that I mentioned in my slide is using the Denodo self-service tool that I have available here. You need to log in also to get those security credentials applied. And it's kind of like a lighter version of the studio that I was showing you before. You have access to different databases. I can click here, in this case in Customer 360, and I get access to the entity relationship diagram, so I can see the different objects and how they relate to each other, in this case, fact and different dimensions, things like that. I can search. This is important because I am not searching based on queries. I'm just searching based on keywords. So I can search for John Smith. And I don't know where that data might be, but my results, I see that there is a match in the table customer, and I can get all the details for that John Smith over here. So actually, there we go, and I can see that, there we go, I have a Smith, and it lives in John Wall Point. So this is actually a pretty nice result. So I'm getting John from here, Smith from here. Probably this was unexpected, but when you're searching based on keywords, this is kind of the benefit. You search based on something that is not really the model. I don't understand if I have this table and this column. You just search based on keywords. So a pretty cool way of looking at your data. Other than that, obviously, you can also go back and see the catalog for the different views and treat those views in the more traditional way. So I can search for customer like I did from Tableau. Get those details, so the description of the view, the schema, the kind of the metadata of that. I can also get the associations for that particular view, the lineage, which is fairly important for a business user. Where is name coming from? I just click on name, and I get that highlighted here on the tree, so I can see that name comes all the way from the table client, from the CRM. So that's pretty important information in the sense of offering metadata to my business users. Lastly, you see also have a query tab here. That query tab allows me to just see data, sample data. I can just add filters or go straight to that magnifying glass and get my data here. If I need something a little bit more complex, I can click on Advanced, and I can do like conditions, group bys, order bys, etc. It's kind of a lighter version of that join wizard that I was showing you in the studio. And from here, I can also even kind of drill down into the details. In this case, check, for example, the invoices related with that particular customer. This is automatically created based on the primary foreign key relationships I have in my model. And then from products, I can go to, from invoices, I can go to products and get the product related with that. So it's from the perspective of exploring, understanding my data model, both on the metadata side and on the data side, drilling down into the actual information, can be a very useful tool. From here, you can even click on export and get that data out in CSV, HTML, Excel, or even Tableau data extracts. So pretty cool way of looking at your information without the need of installing anything, any driver, any reporting tool, etc. And that's it. Hope you enjoy the presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact any member of Denodo. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks for listening.